break that huddle.
Welcome. The IDPro Manager Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is presented by WynnBET. WynnBET is now live in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Louisiana, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Tennessee, and Virginia. From boosted same-game parlays to live in-game odds, WynnBET has what you need to win. Sign up today. Get $100 if you use $100 at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WynnBET. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WYNNBET. State restrictions apply. We're also brought to you by the NASCAR Gambling Podcast. Start your engines with Rod and Cody and get ready to gamble on the Daytona 500 this Sunday. Welcome, everybody. This is going to be a great one. Our first show together, the IDPro Managers Podcast, presented to you by SGPN and all the other great ads we've got. We've got the IDP Tister, Gary. We've got Kraig from Roto Heat. We've got me. Gentlemen, how are we today?
Doing great.
I'm
doing great. Excited.
This is going to be fun.
Yep.
We haven't got to spend some time together here recently in a while, and it'll be nice to talk some IDP without, what is it that you say, Gary? The dirty O?
Yeah. We're going to tap in a little of that this one here with the managers. So I got John overrunning me on the IDP Players Pod, so he got a bunch of dirty offense in with that XFL rankings we got in last week. But anyhow, yeah. I'm really excited to have the IDP Pro Brad and John on with, or shit. Pardon me. I'm used to recording, fellas.
Look at
that
this.
could be deleted out. So I'm a little bit raw, and it's been a long time since getting defensive. But anyhow, I'm really excited to have Brad and Kraig on as IDP Pros. These longtime veterans, man, they know their shit. They've been around, and hey, they deliver it golden. I love it.
It's going to be fun. We're going to have a lot of great conversations and hopefully have a lot of good debates. Kraig and I have always had some good quality conversations together, maybe mixed in with a few dad jokes here and there, but today's is going to be a good one. We're going to be talking about some defensive players that are long-term guys that you want to get on your rosters right now. We've all brought some different players to the table, so it'll be interesting to see where this conversation goes because we all have somebody different, and maybe we don't like each other's players. Maybe we do. We'll see what happens with it. As always, if you guys have questions, drop them in the comments. We will absolutely get you taken care of. Make sure to follow all of us over on Twitter if you want to have some more conversations and keep it going. Gary, you brought us all together. You made this happen. So you bring up somebody first. Who do you want to talk about?
Let's go with Maxx Crosby, I suppose. I mean, he really just came out this year, and he solidified what everybody expected that he had underneath there. I love it how he really where it came out at is as an outside linebacker type defensive end on most plays, DL in most plays like sleeper and dual designated. His combined tackles is outrageous for a defensive end. If you've got him at that type of a play with 89, and that's what stands out for guys like JJ Watt or, Myles Garrett, any of those big boys. Well, Maxx Crosby's been at that cusp. He's there. So where last year I might have avoided him a little bit if, say, somebody else was there, like more TJ Wattish, I guess you could say, then I would have skipped him last year. But I'm not skipping anymore. Not in any dynasty leagues.
Well, and even though Vegas didn't have the greatest season, he still finishes number one in basically every league format when it came to defensive linemen.
As far as I've seen.
Kraig, what's your take on a guy like Maxx Crosby? Do you see him having longevity with a team that seems to be in a bit of disarray?
You know, I'm curious. He had that really great rookie year, and then comparatively to that and what people are hoping for, he had a couple down years after that, and then like Gary said, he had this breakout year this past year. It makes me wonder if part of that has to do with having finally a significant pass rusher across from him. He really didn't have a whole lot, even on the defensive line, in terms of pressure with the Raiders, and that organization's been dysfunctional for, God, I don't know, 10, 12 years, maybe even longer.
Yeah, right.
Than that, maybe forever, yeah. On Madden was there, maybe. But I think having that other pass rushing presence to take some of it off of him really helped him take that step forward. So it makes me just curious. I certainly like him. He's certainly a guy who's top 5 if we're talking about players or defensive ends. But at the same time, how much of that is going to matter with him? Chandler Jones isn't going to be there for that long, I don't think. I mean, he's going to be 33 pretty soon here, and I don't know if the team's going to keep that contract situation with where that team is going. They have a potential out this year. His contract is done after 2024. So long term, if we're looking, I just hope that you were able to maximize that potential with him by having someone relevant across from him, because we see that all the time. Even with, you mentioned like TJ Watt, he didn't have the best year again, but a guy like Alex Heist showed up across from him, and it just helps both of those pass rushes someone to reach his potential.
Oh, and remember, this guy's only 25, right?
What about
he'll
Brad?
be going. What's that? Oh, Kraig's bopping out a little bit on us.
I agree.
But, oh yeah, at 25, he's easily got 4 to 6, maybe even 7 years of solid production. I mean, when I start considering moving a guy like this, is probably as you get closer to that 30 mark, because you never know what you're going to get. But as long as Josh McDaniels stays, and as long as they continue to build this, I mean, if you can get an offense that has some semblance of knowing what they're doing and being able to take some pressure off, I could easily see Maxx Crosby staying at the course that he's on, because he's done it, right? We saw him do it, like you guys said. And even his down years, I mean, he still produced well. I mean, what do you get? Like 7 sacks one year, 7 or 8 the year after. I mean, the guy's still producing even when he's having a down year. Down years, most people's starters at this point, if you're looking at it that way. So,
and at this point, Kraig's got a great point. I mean, Chandler Jones did come in, and of course, he didn't do shit forever, or was sporadic when he did, and then ended up on IR. But I think that they've seen enough that I would hope, seeing what giving a better than average pass rusher across from him does for him, maybe they'll pick up a free agent. Maybe they'll do something worse shit in the draft, and actually compliment him like he should. And like most duels and dual combos of edge rushers in the NFL, usually get them both. That's where your best guys usually lay, other than Myles Garrett.
Well, and a lot of, I think the scheme really works well for Crosby's skill set too. I mean, when you have solid defensive tackles to help take some pressure, I mean, teams aren't just focusing on him because they had, Tillery and Billings, who aren't amazing fantasy assets, but they're good football players. When you have other guys to take pressure off, Jones and some of these other players, then you've got linebackers who aren't a dumpster fire. I mean, you're setting this player up for success, and that's a big deal. If we're looking from an IDP manager perspective, and we want guys that have a good team around a player that we know are going to help set him up for success, Maxx Crosby obviously is easily, one of the top names to look at. Kraig, who do you want to talk about? Who's your first player that piques your fancy in terms of long-term holds?
No surprise, I have to put him on the list, but Micah Parsons is a guy that right up
Homer.
at the top for everyone. Yeah, basically it is. But, when you talk about someone who was drafted as a linebacker, and that's what people thought he was going to be, he sort of turned into more of an edge player for the Cowboys and how he was used both years, and his stats backed it up: 13 and a half sacks, and then 13 tackles for a loss. Tackles aren't completely there just based on how he was used, but if you watch him play, he's constantly around the ball. I mean, the athleticism that he have is just simply amazing, and he can go play linebacker when they need him to. So being able to move around and play like that, and for a guy that he has that passion, he has a drive. When you listen to him, you're like, the Super Bowl ring, that's all he cares about. He's talking about. It doesn't make me feel great as a Cowboys fan, given that it probably means he'll have to go somewhere else. But from a fantasy asset, I love the guy. And for someone who's going to be just 24 here soon, we talked about Crosby at like 25. All these guys are going to be pretty young when we're talking about long-term dynasty assets. So he's a cornerstone player for me easily.
Well, and the thing you love about him is he can do it from anywhere across the field. I mean, You've seen him as a backer. I think the thing that hurts him in fantasy football is when they designate him one thing or the other. I like when he's allowed to be an edge player or a linebacker, because this guy is so talented, and fantasy football kind of pigeonholes him, and that I think that can be a bit of an issue. But I mean, you can expect double-digit sacks. You can expect a fairly high amount of tackles. Expect some forced fumbles. I mean, it'd be nice if he could get an interception or two. That'd really even add a little extra juice to it. But we haven't seen that, obviously. But he's definitely
give it time. Give it time. He will. The one thing I've got a little bit of concern, because I don't necessarily think that they actually rushed him quite as much as they had the previous year, and it seemed to like really not get turned on until towards the end when they was pushing it for the playoffs. But I do know that Van Der Esch is a free agent. I kind of doubt they're going to re-sign him. Kraig, are you worried at all that all of a sudden he's just full-time inside? Are you still placing that type of value on him? I mean, I certainly probably would either way it goes.
I'm keeping it with him either way because just like Brad said, he's used anywhere pretty much on the field, and he's going to be making plays wherever he is. LVE, they weren't even planning on bringing him back this past year, and they sort of had to have that veteran presence. And maybe they do that again if there's a keep contract. But if you think about how well he played, I'm guessing he's going to have potential to get a better contract somewhere else than what the Cowboys are going to give him, because the Cowboys have drafted guys like Jabril Cox, Devontae Clark, other younger guys that they probably want to get in there that don't, right off the bat necessarily have that injury concern that LVE has had throughout his career.
Yeah, it's a big concern.
Yeah, I like the players that they drafted. I mean, Kraig mentioned them. Cox and Clark are both guys that I think should be able to give you Esch potential with better athleticism and less injury concern.
Yep.
So Gary, what? Oh wait, it's going to be me. But you know what?
No, it's on you, Brad.
It is. On
Oh,
me.
I was wondering about WinBet.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering about. So WinBet is the official online sports book of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. WinBet is active in a bunch of states, and there are tons of ways to win, including live betting, same-game parlays, aka WinBet's Build Your Own Bet. Great promos, odds, and payouts are happening right now on WinBet. Are you ready to play? Sign up today and receive a special offer. Bet 100, get 100, limited to state availability. And of course, if you hit the biggest long shot parlay of the week, you get $1,000 free credit. There's so much to choose from. All you have to do is head over to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/winbet so they know we sent you. At sportsgamblingpodcast.com/winbet. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions at winbet.com. Must be 21 or older and present in the state where the play through WinBet is available. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, don't forget, call 1-800-522-4700. Now it's my turn. I'm going to bring a player that I want to talk about, and it's a guy that I've been a huge fan of basically since he got into the league. That's Brian Burns from Carolina. Even though this team has gone up and down in terms of everything, coaching, the players around him, he still continued to produce as a top 10 IDP level. He's kind of bounced around, anywhere from 7 to 12-ish type sacks is what I tend to expect out of him. But, he's like Parsons, 24 years old. He can produce either edge side, and they've seen him rush him either edge side. I've seen him stand up some. I mean, in college, we saw him stand up quite a bit at Florida State. I love the player. I love the potential. And if they can build something around him, I mean, Kraig and I have talked on our show for years about this Carolina defense adding some help in the secondary. They added some safety help. They've added cornerback help. I really think Brian Burns is one of those guys that you can probably get far cheaper than, Parsons or Crosby and get relatively close value.
Huge.
What do you think, Kraig?
Yeah, he's some guy that just for whatever reason seems to continually fly under the radar of those top tier guys when you're talking about defensive ends or edge players. And I'm not really sure why. He didn't do a whole lot his rookie year. You see that a lot. That isn't the biggest deal to me. But then he's gotten better, as it's gone along, and he's going back probably to an outside linebacker with the Carolina going to a 3-4 base defense again. Sometimes it does worry me with guys. But like you said, he sort of did that his first year in the league. He did that at Florida State. And the guy, even if you just read his draft profile coming out, he has amazing just burst and athleticism. So I'm not too concerned about him going back to that. Like you said, I do want to see what they do in terms of that defensive front. It's going to be a change where you might not get that immediate production, just the team going through a little bit of change on the defense. You're going to have to see how those guys like Derek Brown, Yetur Gross-Matos, adapt to that defensive three front now base. But and then who are they going to have across from them? They've been able to find guys and plug and play in there. They brought Hassan Reddick in. They've been trying to draft some guys. So I really like him long term. I'm just sort of interested to see what happens this year. And I'm not having like huge high hopes for the very start of the year. I think they'll figure it out. I think they're building a really nice coaching staff. So long term, I don't really have any huge concerns at all. He's, like you said, a top tier guy, definitely at that defensive end or edge position for me.
Yeah.
I'm definitely buying. When it come to Josh Allen, and him at the beginning of the season, I was like, okay, this is make or break for both those guys. I'm not interested in Josh Allen anymore. To tell you the truth, he's going to have to. Yeah, he's really going to have to do something. Travon Walker, which we'll be talking about, is who I prefer. But Burns, you gotta love him, and he cleaned up his missed tackles. That was a little bit of a concern too. He's down to like 6%. Anything under 10, folks, is just great. So, especially for an outside linebacker, to be honest. Yeah, you guys got my vote with Burns, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'm interested because Kraig mentioned it, the coaching staff. Evero, the defensive coordinator, does a good job of putting these guys in position to be successful. I mean, he's done it multiple places in multiple ways, so I'm not super concerned about him. The middle of the defense is definitely where I'm concerned at now, but I'm hoping they put some of their resources, whether it's free agents or rookies, in the middle, because Shaq Thompson can't do it alone, and Frankie Louvu was a fun story in fantasy, but I don't love him.
You're not buying it? You're not buying it?
Huh? Well, I'm not buying him in this defensive scheme. I think he would be fine in a 4-3 scheme. I don't know how he fits into something that's more 3-4 oriented. He can't really rush from the outside as well, I don't think. And I don't know if he's big enough and physical enough to be a Mike. So it just feels like maybe a tough spot for him. But I know they'll give him a try because he produced well last year. So I'm buying on Brian Burns as well. I'm excited. I actually did land him in a couple of trades near the trade deadline last year, so I was pretty excited that this was our show today because I was like, oh, I'm talking about a guy I love. All right, Gary, who is next for you? Who are we talking about?
Well, I got a little explanation to go with this one, but it's Jack Sanborn, second-year man for the Bears, inside linebacker. We got to see him come on and become this big old waiver wire darling last year, and he was just kicking ass, stacking the box scores, assuming the position where Roquan Smith had left, and just continued to get the tackle numbers. So I don't think he had a lot of splash plays, but hey, it's IDP. I'm going for the core stats. So give me those potential triple digits. I mean, for sure. And now with 18 games, we might be looking at 190 tackles out of some of these guys in these coming years, but who knows? I definitely think that he's going to get a shot again this year, and I think that his Cinderella story is going to carry him for the Bears at least through next year. And I mean, the guy didn't suck. If you look at Christian Harris and his situation, how he came in for the Titans, the PFF, it's not the all be all of everything, but he graded poorly the entire year. Whereas Jack Sanborn did not. He was just under par, but he's got room to grow as an undrafted with Wisconsin pedigree linebacker in him. So, I'm buying, and I think that at any price that I might pay without getting stupid about it, that it's really going to get, pay off long term for me. That's why he made this list for me.
So is this a throwback? Are we looking at a Josie Jewell type linebacker that just better? Kraig, what do you think about Jack Sanborn?
So, he's from Wisconsin. Yeah, my internet is being wonky. I don't know if it's those kids on video games or what right now, but he is sort of that Wisconsin pedigree that Gary mentioned, the throwback sort of linebacker. In those games that he started and, got a huge snap share, it was like 88% or more for 5 games. He had 54 combined tackles with 43 solos. So like Gary said, he's got that potential. The cheap contract that he is on with the Bears, I think, is beneficial. He's got 2 more years. You're super cheap, and then he's a restricted free agent. So if he pans out, someone's going to end up paying him, whether it's the Bears or someone else. And if not, the only worry that I have is if he doesn't show that, health-wise he can stay on the field or production-wise, they're just going to toss him aside. Because that's what you do with undrafted free agents in the league when they don't cost you a whole lot of money. But to Gary's point, it's about your acquisition price. I don't think you're going to be paying the second-round pick to get this guy unless, the other person that has him is a Bears fan or something, you're trying to trade with him. You can still get him in pretty much any league relatively cheap. So if you're a believer like Gary, it's sort of like the perfect storm where you can get him cheap, you can have him in there, and you're hoping to get that production that he showed for those 5 games.
Yeah, I don't hate taking a shot at a guy like this because not only is he young. I mean, I made the joke about the throwback, but he's better than your throwback linebacker because he has good vision. He can play zone better than most because when you watch, especially when you watch those Bears games, that defense was on the field a lot, and I could see him. You know, as a Lions guy, I watched him at least twice this year. He was watching the quarterback's eyes. He was looking to see what was going on there, and you don't see that a lot with those old school thumper linebackers that just want to get downhill and put somebody on their butt. So I like the guy. I mean, he's slower. I think he ran like a 4.6, upper 4.6, low 4.7s, but I don't see him as a true throwback. I think he's got that good tackling ability. He navigates the space well and can get through the line and get into the backfield and make some things happen there. So I'm interested to see a full season of him in this defense, especially because that scheme is made, I mean, perfect for the linebackers to really rack up tackles. So I'm with you, Gary. If you can get him for cheap, you know, I mean, if you're not having to pay a high pick for him or a veteran player, you know, maybe you're a team that's close to rebuilding, you send an old veteran player to go get him. Yeah, why not? Kraig, who are we talking about next?
It's the other side of the Jack Sanborn coin. It's the guy that got sent along to get Jack Sanborn that playing time. It's Roquan Smith. He was a stud linebacker with the Bears, and I think he's just going to continue that, and that's sort of what we saw when he was with Baltimore. I think he's in a great position there where they needed a player like him in the middle of the field to pan out. It really didn't happen with Patrick Queen, and they were bringing in, you know, a whole bunch of guys that were with the team previously that, you know, hadn't been playing much somewhere else or street free agents to try to fill that leadership gap that they had. It's going to be interesting to see what happens on the offensive side of the ball with Baltimore. And if they aren't able to produce, you know, the defense is going to be out there even more, sort of like we saw with the Bears for some time there. But when he's on the field, you know, he's getting you the past 2 years, 160 some combined tackles, 130 some the year before that. He's just an all around great playmaker. But it's the opposite of Sanborn, where you're going to have to pay to get that production from him. And if you don't want to pay for it, you're not going to get it because he is one of those IDP guys that's going to demand a premium for linebackers. But if you have him, sort of like that old, you know, Ron Popeil commercial, you set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about him unless he's on a bye week.
The thing that fascinated me about the situation for him is he had over 160 tackles last year combined. He got traded this year, and you think, okay, new scheme, maybe it's going to take him a little bit to get up to speed. He actually finished with more combined tackles this year than last year. I mean, that just shows you the type of player that you get with him. So I'm on board with you 100%. I think he's got the upside and the skills and the talent to really be one of the top, you know, 3 to 5 linebackers for the next 3 to 5 years. I would think there are some nice linebackers coming out in the draft over the next few years, but I don't think you have anything to worry about. Gary, what do you think about him?
He's a god. I mean, I've already, in my mind, I was looking for that next Bobby Wagner, Luke Kuechly replacement. And, you know, over the last couple of years thinking, well, all right, who's going to be the guy I want for the next decade? It's Roquan Smith. I think as long as he's healthy and he's getting paid, it doesn't matter where it's at, Baltimore or elsewhere. I'm on board. There's every bit of it to like there. You can't get a tackle monster making plays everywhere. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, he's an interesting prospect. I haven't seen his cape, but he's definitely very, 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 very good. All right, so it's my turn. I don't have a Jack Sanborn, but I have a Chad Muma. He is the next guy that I'm interested in, and I know it's crazy that somebody would bring up the guy who was drafted after a first-round linebacker on the same team in the same draft. But this is, you know, if you talked to Kraig and I last year during the process, we both were intrigued by Chad Muma. We thought he had good upside. And when you looked at his profile, he, you know, brought you the size, he brought you the speed, he brought you the tackling ability. I thought it would take him a little time to get up to speed in the league, just coming from this college that he came from. But, you know, when I saw him on the field playing for Jacksonville this year, I saw more than I thought I was going to see as a rookie. You know, he got behind and got a sack. I think he got like 1.5 sacks in limited playing time. I think he only started like 2 games, but he was involved in quite a bit of them. You know, finished under 50 combined tackles. But for me, it's trying to predict moving forward. When I was thinking about this show, I was like, all right, who's somebody that you can get for near free 99 and have as a guy that's long term? And this was a guy that I like. I mean, I don't get me wrong, the guy they took in the first round's pretty good. but I don't think I'd want to pay the price to get him where I could go and get this guy for cheaper and maybe have this guy longer because the vision was there. I watched him keeping his eyes in the backfield, keeping his eyes on the quarterback. So give me a Chad Muma as a cheap stash to see what happens long term. We'll kick it to you, Kraig. What do you think about Chad Muma?
I like the player a lot. You know, he was one of those guys that had the complete athletic profile, but he was just raw in terms of, like you said, where he played college at. I think it was Wyoming.
Yep.
And when he got on the field, he did see it for those 2 games. I think he got hurt in the second one, but he still had, 20 combined tackles. He had a sack and a half, a couple quarterback hits. Didn't do a whole lot in the other games because, and this is where my concern comes in, the other linebackers that they have there. They have Devin Lloyd, where he's a first-round pick. He's going to get the deference. And then that huge contract they gave Foye Aluakon for at least the next couple of years, he's going to be on the field too. So how does Muma fit in there? I mean, if you're thinking like a 5-year window, you're probably hoping he's a starter and, getting to that upper echelon maybe in year 4 of his contract. Probably. And then what happens from him from there, just because of the guys that they're in front of him. You get all 3 of them on the field somehow, you're going to end up eating into each other a little bit. So I really do like him, but I just like him more if he had a clear path to more playing time without 2 other guys that are going to be on the field just given their contract or their draft capital. So I certainly like him, just worried about the situation a bit.
I'm right. Yeah, I'm right there with Kraig. I mean, I think unfortunately, Foye Aluakon, I don't know how bad that
Close
was
enough.
this time. All right. Yeah. All right. So unfortunately, he's going to be signed through this 2023. So the only window I see happening for Muma, personally, unless Lloyd just completely drops the ball, isn't until 2024. So I just think that they're going to let that draft pedigree speak for him, at least at first. So I'm not so sure about Muma. I think it would take this year to really weed this out between the 2 and what the hell we would be looking at. And then, granted, that longer window, I mean, we know it's a gold mine down there for both of them, the 2 main starters. It doesn't matter weak or middle. So it's just getting 2 freaking guys down there that will play and stay and do it. We haven't had that shit in a long time in Jacksonville. 2 viable guys that you could depend on. It's been long time.
Yeah, looking at them, I would love to see Lloyd Muma be those guys moving forward, obviously. But you never know. I mean, the biggest thing is, can they keep this coaching staff intact? Can they let this thing ride out a bit? I mean, there's been so much since they've changed ownership that it's like, just get some consistency down there. Let it grow a little bit. Stop freaking out and selling so quickly. So, all right, Gary, we're back up to you. Give us your 3rd player.
Oh, shit. Oh, I'm going to go with Kirby Joseph, the Lions, 2nd-year safety. Throwing some broad names out here, but I love them, and this one might be one we have to wait on too. He started out with a really big bang when Tracy Walker went down, and the first few weeks, and PFF was loving him, giving him elite scores. He was producing, and he still was the rest of the season. Of course, he did end with more of a on par grade from PFF, and you watch the film, you can see why. The thing I like about Kirby Joseph is that he's in a system that seems to really funnel a lot of production to these safeties, no matter what. And I mean, we've been seeing it for quite a while. Tracy Walker has really been on the whole radar for that. Now he's announced that he's going to be ready for next year. So he's under contract for at least this coming year. You've already, Deshaun Elliott is a free agent too.
Yeah.
Right. But I do expect them to sign him back. I honestly do. So
you need more safeties.
Yeah, right. You can't have enough, right? And especially in today's NFL, trying to stop those passes. But when it really boils down to, for me, is that I think long term, as soon as 2024, he's gold. If not this year.
If he faced Aaron Rodgers every week, he's elite. Right.
Yeah. I mean, even Minnesota.
Yeah. Kraig, what do you think about the Detroit Lions, Kirby Joseph?
I do like what they've done with that defense there, and I think he could be a long-term piece for that Lions defense for a team that, Brad, is finally, it appears, has some light at the end of the tunnel for, NFL continued relevancy, and, probably should have had a playoff push this year with the way things go. I mean,
So
playoff
close.
appearance, they had
So
a push.
close.
It's an exciting team, and I really like him back there. He is a playmaker. He isn't afraid to tackle. He's sort of what you'd want in your safety back there. He just needs more playing time. He was a 5th-round pick. He was out of Illinois, which isn't, I think it was Illinois, but isn't like the top tier competition. Big Ten enthusiasts are going to hate me saying that, but most of the teams there aren't like you're playing, against NFL players week in and week out. So there's going to be a learning curve, but he showed he's not afraid to go out there and face guys like Aaron Rodgers and, figure it out and make the play on the ball. So for a deeper guy compared to who my next guy coming up is in the same draft class, he's cheaper version that could end up being, the same as or better based off what we saw this first year.
Yeah, I love him. I mean, obviously I'm a Lions guy, but when they drafted him, he was drafted to be a project. They weren't going to be starting him immediately. And even in the preseason, they were like, we're going to take our time with this kid because he needs development. Well, Tracy Walker going down. I mean, I think putting his feet to the fire was probably the best thing for him, which it's always a 50-50 toss-up when a young player gets thrown in. They're either going to sink or swim. And he had moments where he was swimming. I mean, he got turned around a few times and got beat a few times, but made enough plays that you gave hope for the future. So I'm 100% on board with it. I think he has value this year. He's probably more of a spot start flex type guy this year, just because you don't want to go into it going, this is my guy. You want to keep, you want to be cautious with it, but there's definitely some optimism here. And even with Tracy Walker, Tracy Walker's 27, 28, Deshaun Elliott's up there as well. I mean, this is your guy that's leading this defense, in 2, 3, 4 years, potentially in that secondary. So I'm with you 100%. Mr. Kraig, who is your guy?
Hey.
What's up, Gary?
Oh, Gary's thinking. What are you thinking, Gary?
I'm thinking I want to take a break.
Oh,
Ever notice these days how things have changed with sports entertainment? Suddenly everyone is edgy and they don't mind offending people with offensive words. It's everywhere. Podcasts, to radio, to primetime TV. All I want are NFL defensive player reports. Maybe a quick update on the best streaming corners. And yet, I have to hear about the dirty O. That's right. Offensive player discussions and hot takes blocking my path to the sweet, sweet defensive information I need.
Bullshit.
That was until I found the IDPro Players Podcast. And now, unless the IDP pros John or Gary mess up, I know I'm not going to be offended by their no dirty O approach.
Damn.
So take my word for it. Catch the sports gambling IDP Pro Player Podcast every week and leave the dirty O behind. So if you or someone you know has an IDP degenerate problem, that's terrific. And the fantasy move to make is to go follow a couple of the best veterans in the fantasy football industry. That was on Twitter at @IDPro. One word at the IDP Pro Players Pod.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, buddy. That
Hey.
was not bad. That was good.
Hell yeah. You guys could go check that out. Search, SGPN Fantasy Football. You'll find all of our content, all the great content coming out on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your well-deserved information and podcasts.
Do it. And now it's time for Kraig to do it. Who are you talking about next, Mr. Reith? I think we lost him. No, he's there.
His kids are in the
Probably
back
Chicago.
of his computer.
Chicago
And yeah.
Bears.
I mean, come on, man.
You're cutting in and out on us, Kraig.
Yep.
Done.
There you are. Maybe
I have to tell the kids to get off the video.
There he
apparently,
is.
when I'm
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
this.
get your spray bottle like cats. Get away, get away. I'm kidding.
Can you hear me? Are we good?
You're
Go.
good. You're
Roll,
let it-
dog.
Let it rip.
Jaquan Brisker, the Chicago Bears, he had over 100 combined tackles as a rookie. He played in 15 games, and in 10 of those 15, he had 6 or more combined tackles. You know, the guy is a physical safety that's out there, but he's also able to be back and make plays. I like what the Chicago Bears are doing. I don't think a lot of people necessarily do in the fantasy community because of that mess that they've had on offense. But at least on the defensive side of the ball, I think they're making sort of that adjustment back to that defense that they switched from like a 3-4 to 4-3 or vice versa, whatever it was. They're finding pieces. They're going to have a little bit of a struggle. You know, that is a competitive division now, but they're finding guys like Sanborn Brisker was, I think, a second-round draft pick this year. I think he might have been the second safety taken. And he proved why. I mean, a lot of people had him up there. Some people had him over Kyle Hamilton, who we'll see what happens with him. But Brisker showed to me he's a long-term piece in the NFL, and he still just isn't one of those top names necessarily where people are going to make it pay an arm and a leg to get him. So I think this is the year to get him if you believe in him, though, because I think this point next year, you're going to be talking with someone you have to pay up for.
Gary, what do you think about Mr. Brisker?
He actually did us a favor by getting a little nicked up there, you know, kind of fading off a little bit towards the last few weeks because, I think that we have a great opportunity to jump on Brisker and the fellow guy that I kind of compare these two more together that we're going to be talking about with Petrie. I'm sorry, which is Brad's guy. These guys kind of go hand in hand, and for me, you know, the numbers are there. The only difference is Brisker looked a lot better on film doing this. So you got to give him the definite edge. And you think about him and Sanborn teaming up for the next freaking 10 years, possibly. Yeah. That would be really appealing. I could dig that.
Yeah, and I'll roll into my Jalen Petrie. Obviously, he's my safety, but Brisker was the more sure tackler. I think that's going to be everybody's biggest knock on Petrie is a lot of missed tackles. That's something you can fix, though. So that's why I'm okay taking a shot on him long term, because what we saw as a rookie, I mean, kid came from Baylor. It's not like he was coming from safety U or anything. I mean, this kid worked hard, showed out on a defense that was struggling. I mean, it's not like they were loaded up with talent. Got you, like 147-ish combined tackles, got you interceptions. There's enough there as a playmaker as well as a tackle machine that made me go, okay, let's see. I know we changed coaches. We've got new schemes. We've got, I love D'Amico Ryan, so I'm excited to see what happens. I don't really necessarily know exactly what to make of his coaching staff so far, so it's still a little early on. So I'm still going to reserve the right to change this. But right now, I like Jalen Petrie. You probably are paying the most for him than you are any of the rookie safeties right now. So maybe I should have said, go get Kyle Hamilton, because he did nothing as a rookie, and maybe he shows out. Right. Hamilton was my top rookie safety, and after the season was over, I was like, man, maybe I made the wrong choice. I love Kyle Hamilton, but everybody else looked better than him.
Well, I think a lot of problem for Kyle is, especially now going into this year, which I've said it before on the Players Pod, I think Patrick Queen is probably on the trade block. But if he's not, that's another problem for the whole safety group when it comes in Baltimore, when you got Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen both on the field for 80+ snaps a game, or 80% of the snaps or more. So that's a problem for Kyle to begin with. I'm not sure if he's ever – I mean, I think there's going to take some serious personnel change and him to fall into a particular slot for him to ever catapult up into the top 5 or anything like that, just by as long as he's in Baltimore. Jalen Petrie, didn't he have Christian Harris in front of him too?
Yeah, but Harris wasn't on the field.
Play very much. Yeah, he had Christian Kirksey for most of the year was one of them.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, he's there. I don't see them replacing his draft stock for sure.
He was a third-round pick, wasn't he?
Yeah, I don't think they can afford to really go there. With the state of where they're at, they need so much other shit. So, yeah, I'm buying. He's up there for me.
Kraig, how do you feel about Petrie?
I like him. My only concern is as the defense gets better around him, I don't think those safeties are going to have the same opportunities as what you saw this year. And maybe it'll continue for the next year, but long-term you would hope, especially with that head coach you mentioned, Brad, being a defensive-minded guy, that they're going to shore up that defensive line and linebackers. Petrie led all defensive backs with 99 solos last year. Second highest with Jonathan Owens next to him with 84. So clearly they had issues with just letting guys get back there for those safeties to tackle. And if you're the Texans, the plan isn't to let your safeties lead your team in tackles like that. So that's my only concern, is that production isn't going to be there long term. Now, he could offset that with other things and how they use them, turnovers or tackles for a loss, stuff like that, blitzing more. There's ways to get around that. But it almost feels to me like you might be buying him sort of at his peak or near it right now, and I don't know that I'd pay that for him. If I got him, I'm certainly holding on to him. I'm not looking to sell him cheap or anything like that. I just have worries about that tackle opportunity not being sustainable long term, unless the Houston Texans continue to be the Houston Texans of the past couple of years.
I anticipate him getting better, but you never know. I'm with you guys. It's definitely shaky ground, but I like the player, and I thought he showed well as a rookie. So, Gary, close out with your last guy. Who else do you got to talk about?
Well, just to wrap up real quick before I take another little quick break, if you don't mind, I wanted to mention about the defensive backs. Now, we've talked about them. We put them in here as long-term tier options, but I want to ask these guys to make a point. So we've talked about linebackers. We've talked about defensive line. We've talked about defensive backs. Which one are you more concerned about to begin with? If you're drafting,
in terms of like if you're buying them, like scoring the long-term projections.
I guess my point is, it seems like with more defensive back sets in the NFL anymore, and this has become bigger and bigger trend, that the defensive back just has a plethora of players each year that you can just pluck and stream. And, you know, some of these guys like Jonathan Owens popped up this year real early, and he was pretty consistent, led a lot of people into the playoffs, if not through. You know, I just wonder how you guys feel about that. Of course, I'm going to say DL.
Yeah, I think
in terms of priority, what we're going out there looking for immediately.
Right. Dynasty priority long term. So we haven't really like been ranking anybody here. We're giving you the top 12 people that we like going forward for the next 5 years. All right. So what in that window. So that's what I'm talking about. If you had your pick of the, you know, I hate to say litter, but if you had your pick of the litter out here, you know, was your number one, Micah Parsons? Because, or would you even bother looking at thinking of the position?
I always want elite defensive ends, then elite linebackers, then elite safety, right? Like, I think I'm with you on the how you rank them. You know, safety is the wide receiver of the defense, right? Like, there's so many good safeties, there's so many good wide receivers. You know, you don't have nearly as many on the defensive line and as linebackers. Kraig?
The pickings get smaller quicker for guys that you like can see being elite on the defensive end or edge position. To your point, Gary, you can find guys every year that come out at linebacker because of injury or just whatever it is. And the same thing with defensive backs now that are going to be productive for you, where it's harder to find those guys along the defensive front for me. And if you get down even more specific, if you're doing like defensive tackles, I mean, boy, does that dry up within the first, 5 guys or something like that. So yeah, defensive line is a priority if I'm having to draft a team for guys that I'm going to just invest in early and just want to feel safe about.
Yeah, I like throwing that in there when we get a chance, because we are talking more to the standard and novice if you're listening to us, but we like to throw in the deep stuff, especially when we're in season, and it really, really counts and help you, win week to week. But either way, that's great stuff, and we'll be back in a second.
A woman is diagnosed with.
Oops, we won't do that.
Literally 1 second.
Yeah. Man, we're gonna have to save that because, hey, folks, you're lucky I haven't crashed and burned. But my wife, she's a breast cancer survivor, and because I don't have my ad shit right, I'm just going to ask you, think of them. Don't forget they do take donations, and they've been around so long. I think they've gotten swept underneath the rug a lot. So I like to make sure that they're out here. So. Well, with that said, how about a little entertainment?
What's that? Your computer has another virus? Well, my friend, you need help to stop your obsession with the dirty O. All of this searching for air yards and yards after catch and blah, blah, blah. Stop your dirty O obsession by searching for the IDP Pro Players Podcast instead, and focus on the other side of the balls. I mean ball. The crew on the IDP Pro Players Podcast care about you and your technology by holding true to their no dirty O mantra. Every week, Gary and John bring you the IDP content you need to save your rosters and dominate your league while avoiding the dirty O. So save your technology by tuning into the IDP Pro Players Podcast with your longtime and totally unoffensive veteran hosts, Johnny the Greek and Gary the IDP Tipster. Follow them on Twitter at I, D, P, one word at the IDP Pro Players Pod.
You better do it.
Hey, be careful what you're searching out there, man. Be careful.
Definitely make sure you spell it all properly.
Big shout out to JJ Winter, my buddy, taking care of these ads and the voiceovers for me. Great guy.
Beautiful golden pipe, soothing sounds. Soothe us with your fourth player, Mr. Gary. Who is it?
All right, I'm sticking. It's like I'm picking on these second year guys. I was glad to see you guys did too. Travon Walker. You know, when the Jaguars took him, I kind of laughed. I think a little bit. Everybody was wondering about Hutchinson and that whole situation, which, however, it played out. But he came in reportedly raw, and I think that was just bullshit because this kid was lighting it up. He just wasn't hitting home yet, and with some more development over this next year, hopefully, and really soon, within a 3-year window, I would hope. I expect a breakout. I expect one of those defensive line type defensive end breakouts. I don't know if he's ever going to get up in those combined tackles, but I definitely like this kid as a solid DL play going forward, probably in the range of the 40 tackle area, 45 tackle area, but I'm thinking he's going to pad that with like 12, 13, 14 sacks for a few years here.
Kraig, what do you think about him?
I still feel he was just taken too early in the draft for how they're using him. He's a guy that I feel would fit better more along a defensive line where he could alternate like he did at Georgia, like some defensive tackle, defensive end. He certainly showed it in that last year there. And he, like you said, he was getting pressure. He was getting to the quarterback. He just wasn't, finishing everything. They had a competent, you want to call him, like defensive end edge across from him and Josh Allen. It's not nobody, but at the same time, he never really just lived up to the hype of that rookie year. So it's sort of that thing with, Maxx Crosby a little bit too. What are they going to do across from him? Because I can't see them signing Josh Allen to a big long-term deal. What are you doing from him then? Because I think he is a guy that's going to need someone across from him. Because if he's like the only, like a TJ Watt with no one across from him for a couple years or something, I don't think he's ever going to live up to it that way. I just like him better on the defensive line.
Yeah, I want to see him on the weak side. That would need to happen for me, to really lock this down. I'd love to see him displace Josh Allen. You know what I mean?
Well, and
he will. I mean, if Allen goes, maybe they'll switch that up.
And they're smart anymore. As a defensive coordinator, you really need to think, where can I put these guys to be mismatches? So you shouldn't be afraid to play a guy on the line, hand in the dirt, stand up, move him around. Like if he's got the athletic ability and the talent, why not move him around? You took this kid number 1 overall. You said this is the best guy in this draft. Like you better use him and you better make good use of him so that you don't look like you wasted that pick and you don't waste the talent. I mean, because he is talented. The athletic ability showed. There were times where, there are some rough edges that they need to clean up, which you have to hope that they do. They'd be smart if they could get, a guy that's as athletically gifted as Josh Allen, but maybe a little bit more refined, because Josh Allen, I really like the player. He's just got to hone it in a little bit. And that's where I'm at. I think Walker can be an elite IDP asset with the right coaching, with the right use of his skill. So I like him. I hope that they do what they need to do with him, which is move him, not be afraid, because it's hard for guys to take on double teams. Not everybody's Aaron Donald, right? No. So I'm there with you. I like Walker. I think he's a good piece.
Jaguars, I mean, look at what they've done. Muma, Lloyd, Cisco. I don't know. I think they might have drafted their entire defense, but a couple of them in the last few years. But they need to focus on that interior defensive line too. They really need to. They need to.
I mean,
do
they
something
have
to
rookies
that.
all over the place. The Campbell kid, Tyson Campbell, the other Georgia corner. They've got a lot of talented players. They just got to put them in the right place.
Yep, they sure do.
Mr. Kraig, give us your last player.
Hello. Can you hear us?
I must have missed something. Yeah, I can hear you guys fine.
You were thinking of the soothing sounds of his other relative, Michael Bolton.
Back in the day. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Verizon, we can hear you now.
Yeah, Nick Bolton's. Nick Bolton's my next guy. You know, he had a nice rookie year. He didn't play all the games, but he was out there quite a bit. And this year he just took off. You know, we even saw him in the playoffs sort of ascend a little bit even more. He wasn't a guy that was really ranked anywhere close to the top 10 for people going into 2022. I think that'll change for people. But for a guy that, you know, again, we talk about age with these, he's going to be 23. He's on a winning team, a high scoring team. There's going to be all the opportunity in the world with him there. So again, much higher end assets are along the Roquan Smith end of the spectrum than compared to those other guys we've talked about by and large with second year guys with maybe more value at a lower opportunity cost. But if you want to look for another stud linebacker to just invest in and not have to worry about, Bolton's right up there for me.
My turn?
Do it.
Yeah, I'm ready. Hey, I'm ready to blow his mind. I got him ranked number 2 this year. I just did my rankings, early rankings, linebacker rankings on the player pod just 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I'm after the year that we had so much up and down with these players and these Leonard and disappointments, bust out and shit. What the hell? Nick Bolton deserves to be up there. He's a beast. He was kicking ass, and he even did it with them giving a lot more snaps to Willie Gay, who I'll also mention who held his own this year. So,
and I think that's what stopped people. I think people expected Willie Gay to kind of ascend quickly, and Willie Gay was fine, but Bolton was better.
Yeah. Well, Willie Gay's freaking lucky that they even gave him snaps, because in the past it's been one inside linebacker getting that opportunity, really, you know, and then they kept rotating those guys for the last couple of years in game. It sucked. It made it really tough. So at least hopefully it's a little risk factor with Willie Gay, but hopefully he can emerge and continue and not get suspended and play a whole year. And maybe we can have some linebacker 2 numbers out of him. Yeah. But back to Bolton, gotta love him, man.
He's almost as sure a thing as you can get at a price that's super cheap, right? Like you're paying a premium for a guy like Roquan Smith. You're probably paying less than half the price for Nick Bolton right now, I would think, just because of the name. So I'm with you guys. I think Bolton's a fun buy. I think because we don't have a lot of kind of under the radar elite linebackers to target, I think this guy's at the top of that list because he has that elite potential, even if he isn't the most. I mean, and I think a lot of the issue was, at least if I recall, as I was prepping for the show, I was looking back through my notes of him as coming out. I thought his athletic profile wasn't the strongest, and that was kind of where I was like, well, what is he? Is he just a tackle machine that can't give you anything else? Well, he gave you more, and he looked really good on the field. So I was wrong on that. But I would definitely target this guy. If you can get him if you're in a league with newer IDP owners and you can get him for a fair price, I would absolutely jump all over it. Some guys are going to overvalue him and ask you to pay Roquan Smith prices, and I would not do that. I would just look elsewhere.
Oh, yeah. Altogether, that's another great point, Brad. We try to point out for those novice owners. I mean, man, when you look at that year that I mentioned this past year with the linebackers, we had so many breakups, sleepers, and everywhere. So it's like there was, especially at the standard smaller size leagues with maybe 5 to 6 starters, or you just got all kinds of them. So don't ever, I personally never suggest anymore to draft any IDP player before you have a starting offense and maybe even one backup, and then start. Because a lot of people are jumping on Parsons or jumping on these guys, Roquan Smith, and they'll do it based off the projected points, which I get inside the sites, because you're thinking, okay, do I go draft this tight end that's only going to give me 130 points this whole entire season, or am I going to go get Roquan Smith? And I get it, but man, you can get so much value later in drafts. We do it every year. I got Mosley of all things last year late in drafts. I got Alex Anzalone. I got Drew Tranquil. You got to look at Frank Louvu coming up. You get all of the Franklin Zier, all of them. It's a different ball game, folks. So don't concentrate on IDP so much that you don't do what you really know, and that's hook up that offense and let your IDP support that.
I won a championship, not last year, but the year before, because I had a extremely strong defense and just a good enough offense. So defense wins championships.
Yes, it
Offense
does.
can win championships. I mean, it can go a little different ways depending on how your league's set up.
Mm.
All right, I'm going to wrap it up with my last guy, Jevon Holland, safety from Miami Dolphins. This guy has continued to be under the radar, but as a guy like coming out as a rookie, we saw improvement from year 1 to year 2. You know, he got up like 77 tackles or something. I mean, he went from like 40 something to 70 something in tackles. We saw a little bit more. We saw that he can continue interceptions. He'll be a little bit as a guy that can get in the backfield and get you a sack. What I was looking at when I was looking at the idea for this show was, how can I find an under the radar guy who's young enough that can give you 5+ years of potential production, that has shown improvement, that, you know, just all those key kind of sleeper type factors. And Jevon Holland just kept coming to mind. I mean, I really like the player. I like the defense. I like where they're going as a team, you know, and he's a guy that you can still get for cheap. I think I traded for him for like a late third just recently. So I was like, all right, well, this feels like a perfect pick. But again, there's a lot of good safeties out there. I mean, this guy, I think he was like safety 20 on the year last year. And he averaged, I think, 2.5 points less per game than the guy who was number 2 overall, which was Julian Love from New York. So it's, I mean, between you have one elite guy in Jalen Petrie, who we all said, okay, could be, could not be, who knows? And then after that, I mean, 2-3 points per game really separates the next 20 guys, which is crazy to me. So Holland is a target for me. Kraig, what do you think about him?
Going into that draft, he was my top safety. After the draft, he remained there, and he's still one of my favorite guys. He was a ball hawk when he played at Oregon. He's shown that in the NFL here too, like you said. Not to be undersold. I mean, 17 pass deflections in 2 years for a young safety is good. And they're also using them all over the field. They didn't use him as much as a safety this year. They had him in the slot quite a bit, which is good for, being up closer to the line of scrimmage and getting some of those tackles. So it'll be interesting to see what's happening. They're talking about cutting Byron Jones. The Dolphins defense, has some question marks about how they're going to play this out in the secondary. So it's worth keeping an eye on. But a guy that talented is going to be on the field for him, whether it's as a safety or, switching between that and the slot. And he's still certainly a buy for me. So it's a great pick, Brad.
Mr. Gary.
Yeah, I loved it. He's top 24, was going to record the player pod tonight and do my defensive backs, folks. He is 21st for me. So I was happy to see him on there. It makes me look like I'm not quite an idiot, I suppose. Yeah, all right. So gotta love them. You gotta love that versatile role that they use and within the scheme. Hey, they're getting some pass rushers, which is a good thing, for anybody in the secondary, because you're applying pressure. The guy's under duress. He throws interceptions and poor passes. So gotta love it. I think he's going to stick around for a long time and become even. I think he grows. I think we got a good flash of him last year. We got a nice solid piece of him this year. And I think there's no reason we can't see a third-year breakout out of him.
Absolutely agree. So that's it, folks. We've given you 12 guys that you should target. Some of them you're going to pay a premium for. Some of them you might get for free 99. Who knows? We thank you guys as always. Gary, is there anything else you want to wrap up this first amazing show with? Is there any other thoughts, comments, concerns?
Well, Brad, Kraig, again, thank you for joining as the IDP pros that you are. And I'm going to love this every Friday, folks, at 10 o'clock. Catch us live on Twitter and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe.
Kraig, my friend, any final thoughts as we wrap up today?
Just glad to be on with you guys talking about football again. It's going to be getting hot and heavy out there in the world with rookie content, but you're going to be wanting to know about all the other moves going on and not just everything rookie focused, because that can make you go a bit insane too. So we'll be bringing you some non-rookie stuff too that you can dig your mind into and enjoy throughout the offseason.
Thank you, everybody, as always. Thank you, WinBet, for sponsoring us. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. We'll see you again next Friday.